All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Hawk Droppings with your host. I'm Hawk. We have another amazing guest for this episode. Pretty much everybody who follows me on TikTok knows her as well. The illustrious Attorney Di. Welcome, Attorney Di.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you, and I really appreciate you doing this. We have a whole bunch of stuff to discuss today. We're going to talk about we're recording this about 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, September 5th. So there was a hearing this morning in Judge Tanya Chutkan's courtroom in Washington, D.C. on the January 6th case, Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, the superseding indictment that was brought by Jack Smith. We're going to talk about that hearing. We're going to talk about that order. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming up in the Manhattan criminal case where Trump was convicted of 34 felonies. There's some stuff happening there. We'll talk about the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case and the appeal that's pending. We'll update you guys a little bit on the Georgia RICO case. And then we're probably going to discuss the DOJ's indictment this week regarding Russian disinformation and all the right-wing podcasters that are now getting caught up in that, and how enjoyable it is for people like us to watch them all freaking out, knowing that they're not going to get paid anymore. All right, so first things first, we had the hearing this morning. So this was basically just like a status conference, a scheduling hearing. Both sides got to give some input about how the case should proceed from here. Did you by any chance read the actual joint brief that the two of them filed together?
Yeah, the joint status report. I did go through it. Yeah.
It didn't seem like they agreed on a whole lot.
No, they didn't. Even the format of the report was different.
Yeah. What kinds of things did you notice in that document when you read it?
I guess I would notice the professionalism versus not.
Mm-hmm.
So, the defense is just trying to get the case completely dumped, completely dropped. So every time they say anything, the whole point is, well, I guess if you want to go on with the case, then we'll do this.
Yeah, and I guess they were proposing that literally every single thing that the court could consider at this stage should be considered after the election.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll discuss this more in a minute. Judge Tanya Chutkan did not go along with their suggestions.
No, she didn't. Oh my gosh. I am adoring her. Every time she's having a hearing, I am adoring her even more.
Yeah, between her and Judge Merchan, I think the two of them are just such exemplary examples of professionalism and what trial judges ought to be. And it's especially compared and contrasted to Judge Eileen Cannon in the Mar-a-Lago documents case.
I agree. And Judge Merchan's got the benefit of decades of work. But Judge Chutkan, even though she's newer, her level of professionalism is exceptional.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if are you Facebook friends with, or TikTok friends with Eliza Orlins, the public defender from Manhattan?
Maybe.
So I'll send you one of her videos so you can check her out. But she's been a public defender in Manhattan for 15 years. And during that period of time, repeatedly has practiced in front of Judge Merchan. And watching her TikToks during that trial was of great benefit to me. And I'll have my brother put her TikTok handle in the show notes so that everybody can go follow her. But this hearing, it's such a contrast, reading about some of these hearings that took place in Southern Florida in front of Judge Cannon versus, because the New York Times had this live feed going. They had reporters in the courtroom this morning, giving updates every couple of minutes about what was happening. And some of the exchanges between the judge and I think his name is John Lauro, Trump's attorney, were just kind of stunning.
Yeah, I think the disrespect is so obvious. And it was pretty obvious with Judge Merchan, but he just didn't have time for it. Judge Chutkan, I think, will eventually get to that point as well.
Yeah. And, so, I mean, in this joint statement, each side got to propose what they think the schedule for the case should be moving forward. Trump's attorneys wanted to push literally everything beyond Election Day. And I think, and they said, so what it seemed to me was that they wanted to deal with each issue separately, like one after another, as opposed to deal with everything all at once. Like they talked about, because the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case, Trump filed a motion to dismiss that case based on the allegation that Merrick Garland doesn't have the legal authority to appoint Jack Smith as a special prosecutor or special counsel, whatever the title is.
Right.
And tell me if I'm wrong, there's like 40 years of precedent on that question, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah. And Judge Eileen Cannon went against all of that precedent and dismissed the case.
Yeah.
And we'll go into some background a little bit as to why. It has to do with Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion on the immunity case out of the Supreme Court. But now Trump's attorneys want to make that same argument in this case, in the Washington, D.C. case. And one thing that I found interesting is that, I don't do a ton of stuff in federal court, but I know that there's a rule that whatever court you're in, if there exists, controlling precedent on the issue that you're addressing with the court, you have to tell the court about that, even if it goes against your argument.
Yes. Well, that is preferred.
Well, and Trump's attorneys didn't do that here, did they?
No. But honestly, they didn't do that in Florida either.
I know Jack Smith provided Judge Cannon in Florida with all of that information, and she just ignored it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think it's interesting that a bit like Hunter Biden did in California, where he tried to say, special prosecutors not allowed here. I think they tried to swing the same thing in DC and say, well, we've already got one judge that said this, but I don't think they're understanding how weak Cannon's decision is. It's not strong enough to hold up another jurisdiction or another order.
Yeah. All right. So basically, the two main issues, I think, that everybody was dealing with today is, Trump and his attorneys are going to file that motion to throw the case out because Jack Smith was improperly appointed. And then there are the things that Jack Smith wants to do and has already done relative to the Supreme Court's immunity decision. And when this hearing was set, it was originally set like a month ago or 3 weeks ago. And then Jack Smith asked for more time. And let me get your thoughts on this. I expected him to file an amended indictment that would comport with the Supreme Court's decision. What I didn't expect him to do was to convene a second grand jury and do a superseding indictment.
I didn't either. But honestly, it seems that's kind of his preferred style, in my opinion. Based off of what he did in Florida, I think it's just what he likes to do.
Yeah. And I was talking to my brother, and I was like, I guess that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and he's doing what he's doing.
Right. Exactly.
Because, he's smarter than me.
Well, I mean, I think he's got so much evidence and so many things that we don't really even know of yet that it's comfortable for him to pull a grand jury in.
Yeah. And when I heard that he had done that, then I was like, oh, then it seemed obvious that that's what you would do. And for people who aren't really following this, within the Supreme Court's immunity decision, there was one section, like the whole of the decision was a 6-3 opinion, 6 conservatives and the 3 liberals, except for one section. I think it was like section 3 about evidence. The 5 male conservatives just invented this thing that said because a president has immunity for official acts, then prosecutors can't use any evidence of those official acts to support criminal charges in a different area. And Amy Coney Barrett broke with the 5 conservative guys on that and wouldn't sign on to that part of the opinion.
Yeah.
Which every now and then she's doing that now, and I appreciate that in her, even though, she still makes me cranky most of the time.
I think she's a true wild card, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think anybody saw that coming either. But so I think the main reason why Jack Smith convened a second grand jury is to present the evidence to that grand jury without evidence of official acts that had been included the first time he presented the case to a grand jury. And once I thought about it in those terms afterwards, I was like, well, yeah, of course that's what he would do. Because he's going to make this thing bulletproof.
Exactly. I think so. Exactly. And a lot of what I saw in that first indictment wasn't honestly really necessary to prove those 4 charges. It was a lot of extra information. And once they trimmed that down, tossed out what the Supreme Court was all getting upset about, the indictment is still incredibly strong without it. They don't even need it. So why keep it and why argue about it?
Yeah. And I mean, so terminology wise, Jack Smith is big on what we refer to as speaking indictments for the folks watching. Like if you compare the indictments that we've gotten from Jack Smith to like the indictment that we got from Alvin Bragg in the Manhattan case,
Mm-hmm.
the indictment in the Manhattan case was just like 10 or 12 pages long, contained very little factual information. And Jack Smith's indictments are like reading a book. It tells a story from start to finish with a tremendous amount of detail.
Yep.
Which I love.
Well, I think it's great too because we have some idea of what's going on, although legally it's just not necessary.
Yeah. I mean, when we got his first indictment in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case, and I was like, I had never seen an indictment before that had color photographs in it.
Me neither. That was my first one. I was like, what? Visual aids? Sweet.
I was like, this is amazing, man.
Yeah. Yeah. A+ paper.
And I mean, God, I would never want Jack Smith investigating me. I'll tell you that. And I haven't broken any laws, but even so, it was just like, man. So he redid all of that. He's making this stuff bulletproof. He basically said to the court, my immunity brief is written, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We can file it at any time.
I think he had asked for like an additional 3 weeks to kind of polish everything up. But yeah, they basically have it.
Well, and per the order, that brief is due in 3 weeks, 3 weeks from today.
Yep. Exactly.
And we'll come back to that in a second. But so Well, and here's another thing. I mean, that brief, even though it's the initial brief on this issue, it's basically an opposition to a motion to dismiss
Right.
based on the Supreme Court's immunity decision. So Judge Chutkan is kind of letting him do this in reverse order a little bit, which I thought was interesting. But also, I think smart, because the Supreme Court basically did say in their decision, you got to deal with these immunity issues at the very beginning.
Yeah, and I'm totally in agreement. We've got to get that immunity off the table first. But I have to say that by doing the superseding indictment, like Jack kind of set it up to do it in reverse order.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. So, one thing about that hearing today, John Lauro, Trump's attorney, was going back and forth with Judge Chutkan on the immunity stuff. And he said in open court that Judge Clarence Thomas directed us to do this. And she was like, pardon me?
Yeah, that was a big
Directed you? And he was like,
yeah.
well, not directed. And so I think, I mean, okay, I'll do it this way. What Judge Thomas wrote about the appointment of special counsel was in a concurring opinion, not in the majority opinion, which he did not write. And why don't you tell people how much legal authority a concurring opinion has?
Like none. You know, it goes with all of the other times where he said things like Times versus New York Sullivan or that should be overturned, and the Tinker case should be overturned. And all of that is in the same vein that he's done this comment as well. So it was, in my opinion, unusual to see Judge Cannon actually take it seriously based off of all of his other comments that he continues to make as well. But no, that's not precedent. That's a judge just sharing his thoughts and feelings in the moment.
Well, like in his concurring opinion to the Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade, he was like, yeah, we should also overturn gay marriage and criminalize gay sex again.
Exactly. Obergefell would be gone. All of those cases would be gone.
Which had nothing to do with the case at hand.
Right. Ugh.
He's such a whack.
He drives me crazy.
Yeah, he makes me nuts, man. But, you know, I mean, God, he's just, I don't even know where to start with that guy anymore. I mean, he's just so unimaginably corrupt. And it seems to me that he has like zero respect for the Supreme Court.
Oh, I agree. I don't think he has any respect for anything at all. And he has got such a chip on his shoulder. He doesn't even have a shoulder anymore. And he it's like, look, I'm on the court in order to get benefits. And if that means extra money, if that means a giant RV, whatever, I'm here for the benefits. But when it comes to the actual law, forget about it.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, with their immunity decision, my opinion was that they just made all that up out of nothing.
Yeah, I don't think that's an opinion. I think that's just facts. They just made that crap up.
It just,
They made it all up. I was on a live when the decision came down with Embellicos, and because we've been going through this case quite a bit, and I started seeing like little stars as I was reading it. I was like, wait, what's happening? I thought I was going to pass out because I could not believe the kind of crap that they were pulling in that moment.
well, and then, yeah, same. And then I got to that section about evidence that Amy Coney Barrett begged off of.
Right.
And I was like, this is just completely fabricated out of nothing.
Right. Right.
It was just stunning. It's just stunning to me.
I think I may have fallen off my chair actually at that section.
Yeah.
I had to get back onto my chair.
So So that hearing with Judge Chutkan was this morning, and then at the end of the day today, she issued a scheduling order. And boy, compare and contrast this to Eileen Cannon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the order consists basically of 5 paragraphs on the second page of here are the things that are due and here are their due dates. And it's like 10 or 12 briefs that are due between now and the end of October.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. Like, that's a full syllabus.
I was like, this is insane, man. This is crazy. But I noticed, and I wanted to ask you your thought on this. I noticed that she lays out all of this briefing that basically takes up the rest of September, all of October, the final brief due on November 7th, but she didn't set a hearing date in this brief.
Right.
Is it your thought that she's going to set a single hearing to deal with all of these motions and oppositions?
I think she's going to do some kind of a blended hearing.
Okay.
I also think she wants a chance to really see what the arguments are that are getting fleshed out in the briefs. I think she really needs to see that information before she actually sets the hearing itself. But yeah, I think she's going to double it up. She likes to do that, though. She piles stuff on. Like when she first came back, her motion to dismiss was already included in her scheduling order. So there are a lot of things she likes to stack. So I think it was a matter of combining it, but also having a chance to see what the real arguments were going to be.
Now, let me ask you this. I mean, because Jack Smith, his team basically told her attached to our immunity brief is going to be a whole bunch of evidence that's currently under seal.
Yes, I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, including grand jury transcripts of testimony and other items as well. Do you have any sense? And that brief is due on September 26th, which is about 6 weeks before the election.
Mm-hmm.
What's your understanding? And so those things will still be under seal, meaning private, away from the public, can't see it. What's your understanding as far as what's the process to unseal some of that or all of that? And do you think this judge is going to do that on this brief?
That's a good question. I think for the things that need to be unsealed, they're going to have to take it one at a time. Are both sides agreeing? And that means no, they're not going to agree. And then she'll make her decision, and then they'll try to do an interlocutory appeal. And
Yeah.
then we'll have to deal with that over and over and over again. But I think this time Judge Chutkan will say, look, I've got to keep moving. I'm not going to stop this case for an interlocutory appeal. But I also think Jack's going to be careful about using evidence that isn't under seal in a way, or using it in a way that keeps it under seal, but that the public knows what he's talking about.
Interesting. I mean, she's a judge. Judges control their own courtrooms. Do you have any understanding as to whether or not she can just decide on her own without input from either side? I'm going to make the following documents public.
I don't think she will. I think it's possible, but that's something like if you've got a clean case and you're walking first in the door and you're like, I think we all need to have this documentation out in the open. That's a very different situation than what they're talking about in this case, where we've been up to the Supreme Court, we've been back down. We don't even know what witnesses would be allowed, what kind of testimony would be allowed, because there's so many questions. I think she's going to be extra careful about that.
So, yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, do you think, from looking at this briefing schedule, it's all of September, all of October. The final brief is a reply brief due from defendants on November 7th. It doesn't sound like any of these motions are going to be resolved before the election, correct?
Probably not.
Yeah.
We can hope, and I think she'll try to do her best, but I don't see how any of this could be resolved before the first week in November.
Yeah, because I think, and this kind of ties in a little bit to the next case we're going to talk about, Manhattan, because with Judge Merchan, that's the case where Donald Trump got convicted of 34 felony counts. The schedule in that case is on September 16th. Judge Merchan is going to hand down his decision on how and if the Supreme Court's immunity decision applies to that case. And then Donald Trump, as of now, is still scheduled for sentencing 2 days later on September 18th. And I was reading this order from Judge Chutkan today and just thinking, okay, as soon as she hands down any kind of decision on how the immunity decision from the Supreme Court applies, Donald Trump's immediately going to appeal that all the way up to the Supreme Court as well.
Absolutely.
And I can't wait for that because I want these conservatives to go through the actual facts in this case and say Donald Trump has immunity from this. And because I was stunned in their immunity decision when they said he has immunity from trying to take over the Department of Justice and use it to further his voter fraud efforts and his efforts to overturn the election. When they said that explicitly, I was just like, this is the most screwed up Supreme Court in my lifetime.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I felt like half of my law school knowledge just fell out of my brain.
Yeah. And when I was listening to the oral arguments on that, in the Supreme Court on that immunity issue, I felt especially like John Roberts, Sam Alito, Kavanaugh, they seemed to feel more offended by the fact that Donald Trump was being prosecuted versus the things that Trump had actually done.
Yeah, it didn't seem to matter. What the point was is that we had an unliked president being targeted by the prosecution, and that wasn't right.
And I was just like, oh, I guess all the men on the court watch Fox News.
Well, yeah. Uh-huh.
All right. Well, let's talk about Manhattan and Judge Merchan, because I think he had initially scheduled sentencing for July, and then when the Supreme Court's immunity decision came down on July 1st, he bumped that to September 18th and said, okay, I'm going to have to take some time and figure out how this decision applies to this case. And I mean, the conduct in this case, I kind of divide into two parts. There was all kinds of stuff that took place before Trump was even elected or inaugurated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only things in that case that took place after Donald Trump was president, while he was in the Oval Office, was him signing those checks in the Oval Office to reimburse Michael Cohen, which I don't really see any argument that you can make that those are official acts, right?
Well, right. And neither did the federal judge. For me, I'm following the immunity argument based almost completely on what the federal judges said. Look, you've got no federal acts. You can't come into federal court. This doesn't apply, so get back into the state court. To me, that means there's no immunity application at all.
Yeah. I'm very much looking forward to seeing Judge Merchan's decision on the 16th. I mean, it's like one of the things that I like about him, one of the things I like about Judge Chutkan, they're both very good writers. They're both extremely skilled with the English language. And I think the judge, oh God, I can't remember his name, the judge in the New York civil case.
Engeron.
I
find he's funnier.
He likes to incorporate a little bit more humor, but I really enjoyed reading the final decision in that case because that was a bench trial. There was no jury, And I think that decision was what, like 98 pages long or something.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It was a long one, but it was really thorough, and I really appreciated. I mean, he included a recap of every single witness's testimony in that decision.
Yeah. And everything was cited so perfectly to the transcript. I appreciated that as well. Like if you had any question about whether or not what he said was actually the truth, you just looked it up yourself.
Well, I read that, and you know, like I mean, so where I work every summer, we have summer associates, and that's kind of like the process of, or summer clerks, kids who are still in law school. And, it's like, okay, you're here now at a law office, you're not in a classroom. And, we always spend that summer with them, talking to them a lot about writing and how, almost everything you're writing as though it's going to be read by a judge eventually,
Exactly.
and right to the judge. And I read Judge Engeron's opinion, and I was like, oh, he wrote this for the Court of Appeals.
Yes, he did. I think he wrote it for the Supreme Court.
You may be right. Yeah. So, that case is currently being appealed to the state court of appeals, right?
Right, right. We're only in the first batch of appeals with that case.
So has anybody filed any briefs in that case yet? Appellate briefs?
Hold on, let me think. I've got to go back in my brain.
Yeah. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We just had a decision actually that set out what we're doing. So no, I don't think we have briefs yet.
Okay. So we just now basically got the briefing schedule, more or less.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I know, especially at the state level, I know it's true out here in California. I mean, I've been involved in. I mean, you can get extensions of time for when your brief is due, and you can drag that out for like a year if you want to.
Oh, absolutely. Wait. It's clicking. They both have done their briefs. I'm sorry.
Okay.
They've both done their briefs, and we have one more brief waiting on the appellant. So Trump's reply is not done yet.
Okay. All right. And
Sorry.
okay. So then once that's done, then I'm sure they'll schedule that one for oral argument not too long after there. Boy, that's going to be a fun transcript to read, that oral argument.
Oh my gosh, man. I feel like he's using up the whole system. Like there's not going to be anything left for anybody else after he's done.
No. No. And I just, yeah, it's going to be amazing. So, but as of now, in the Manhattan case with Judge Merchan, the two dates of September 16th for his immunity decision and September 18th for sentencing, those are still on calendar right now.
Yep.
And we just got to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. And again, I think the decision that just came down a couple days ago from federal court will be that final piece for Merchan's decision on the 16th.
Okay, so you're talking about, I can't remember that that judge's name. I know it starts with an H. The federal judge who denied Trump his motion to remove that case to federal court from state court.
Like Halverstein, I think.
Yes, I think you're correct on that. That's you're very close. I know it had multiple syllables, but so because I had a lot of people ask me, the jury already reached their verdict. They're only waiting on sentencing. What's the point in trying to send it to federal court now? And I didn't read any of the pleadings on it, but the only thing I could come up with, it was like, I don't know, if he's successful on that and gets reelected, then he can pardon himself.
Yeah. I think moving anything into federal court is going to be a benefit for him and his cronies.
Yeah.
I think that's how it is. I
Oh,
think anything at state court's going to come for him. I think really New York and Georgia are the true cases that are going to come for him. Uh, we look at the federal cases, those are bigger cases, those are super important cases, but ultimately those can be moved around depending on what's going on. It's the state cases that really are going to have the teeth.
yeah. Well, all right. So speaking of state cases, we've got the Georgia RICO case with Fani Willis out of Fulton County,
Oh, that
Georgia.
case. Oh,
When that case went off the rails and it came out that she'd had a relationship with her lead prosecutor, Nathan Wade, first of all, it's like I felt terrible for her. Second, I immediately was like, what an unimaginably stupid decision on this case, on this case of all cases, to do that.
yep.
And because, I mean, Trump did what Trump does. I mean, he just beat it to death and filed a motion to have her disqualified. And from what I understand, the trial judge said no, she's not disqualified. And now that ruling itself is up on appeal.
Yeah, that's the appeal.
And that's in front of a panel of appellate judges who were all appointed by Republicans, and they're pushing everything beyond the election date.
Yep.
Great. Yeah.
But they found a problem in Georgia law. This hadn't truly been settled. And so they found that little piece that was unsettled that took it all the way up to the appellate court. But on the other hand, DA Willis should have known everything has to be perfect in this case. Perfect. Now, I'm not saying just because she's a woman or people can't have relationships, I'm not saying anything like that. But when you're going to fight somebody at this level, it has to be perfect.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like each of these prosecution teams has to be absolutely perfect and spotless
Right.
from start to finish.
Yep, I agree.
I was so bummed out when that happened.
I was too. And, we're all humans. We all do things. And in
Yeah.
all of the other cases, who knows what would have happened if it had been a fella doing the same thing. I get it. I get it. But when you're fighting a battle this huge, you've just got to watch it. And I was shocked and surprised that she didn't.
Especially given that in all four of these cases, it's like you got Alvin Bragg in Manhattan, you've got her case in Georgia, and Jack Smith's two cases in D.C. and in Florida. Fani Willis is the only one that's gotten guilty pleas out of people.
Yes, exactly. She already had four.
She got four of those defendants to plead guilty, three of whom were Donald Trump's former attorneys.
Yep.
I mean, that was just stunning to me. Like when Sidney Powell pleaded guilty, I was like, holy crap.
Yep. Well, they pushed the
And
speedy. I think that tends to happen. They push the speedy too hard, in my opinion. But
speedy trial.
yeah, if they hadn't done
Yeah.
that, we probably would have been hanging out. No one would have gotten a guilty.
Yeah. But good for her, man. I mean, she got three of Trump's former attorneys to plead guilty. And like with Kenneth Chesebro, it was all on that fake elector stuff. And now he's got six other states that he's got to deal with where he did the same thing.
Yep, exactly. He's flying all over the place trying to sort that out. And Jenna Ellis, she's already in it neck deep as well. The Georgia case, when it first came down, was a mess. It didn't ever get cleaned up, but the hope was there because Fani kept pushing it, because she was getting the guilties, because she was putting the pressure on. And I think now that we've got these questions in front of the Court of Appeals, we can step back and see how much of a mess the case was and see how far it's going to take us to get through the Court of Appeals. So it's been a roller coaster.
And yeah, it really has. And every time Jenna Ellis's name comes up, I always like to remind people that she caught COVID from one of Rudy Giuliani's farts. Rudy Giuliani farted on her during a fake Georgia Senate hearing, and she caught COVID from that.
Man, he did her so dirty. He did her so dirty. I'm not saying I've got sympathy. I'm just stating facts here.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that brings us to Judge Eileen Cannon, the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. And she, I mean, when that order from her came out dismissing the entire case, I was kind of like, wow, I didn't think she had that in her.
I didn't either.
I mean, because she had already been under such a tremendous amount of scrutiny for tilting the scale in Trump's favor that when that order came out, like I read through it and I was like, my initial reaction was, oh, I guess she doesn't want to be on this case anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Because she's basically just telling the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, remove me from this case.
Well, I tried. I tried so hard with Judge Cannon to give her the benefit of the doubt. I gave her 3 strikes. I said, you get 3 chances to screw up and then you're out. She screwed up before the decision came down. But as soon as I saw it was a 93-page decision, I knew something was going to go wrong. And for me, to have a judge sit there and analyze the law in a way that's completely out of left field with no basis, without any power, which she has no power to do what she's trying to do, I thought was just like, well, good luck with that.
I mean, but that's the beauty of being a federal judge who's appointed for life. Which it's like I remember when I was a kid, and those court appointments weren't as political as they are now. I think the first two of them that turned into like actual knife fights was Clarence Thomas and Robert Bork.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's a blast from the past. And now it's just like Republicans are like, "Oh, you were in the Federalist Society? Great. You're qualified. We'll give you the job." And then we start ending up with these people like Eileen Cannon and then Matthew Kaczmarek in Amarillo, Texas.
Yeah. I think we just had Slim Pickens. It's Slim
Man,
Pickens, man.
that Kaczmarek guy is a piece of work too, because then his cases get appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they're a bunch of whack jobs too.
Yep. Yep.
I mean,
It's
they go
hard when
too far even.
Oh, I was going to say, it's hard with all of the politics going on and all of the crap going on. At the end of the day, you're like, well, whatever, we got to keep moving forward. But when you start seeing it really get into the courts with the judges and the different districts, then it starts having a different feel to it.
Well, the thing I love about the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and for people listening, I think the Fifth Circuit is Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. The Fifth Circuit goes way too rogue on a regular basis, even for this Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, they're getting their stuff overturned left and right by the Supreme Court. I think more so than any other circuit right now. So did you read the appellate brief from Jack Smith in the Mar-a-Lago case?
Yes.
I haven't read it yet, but I've heard people say good things, that it's basically a slam dunk.
Well, I'm not sure. As attorneys, we both know slam
Sure.
dunks. But there were some really nice highlights, like when he was trying to give English lessons on which order the words go in. When you're reading a statute, he's like, well, if the word had gone in here, you might have been right, but it didn't go in there, so you're wrong.
Wow, man.
Yeah, so I thought that was really great. I had to like dust off my English, grammar dictionary to go through it. He did a great job. He didn't need to be excessive. He didn't need to be rude. He didn't need to be sarcastic. All he needed to do was just state what it was, and that's what he did.
Well, what do you remember off the top of your head the name of the appellate attorney that he brought on?
I don't. It was a dude.
Guy, it's a guy who, I mean, he's been arguing in front of the Supreme Court for something like 40 years.
Hmm.
He's done over 100 Supreme Court arguments. In fact, one thing that I remember is when he walked up to the podium to give his arguments in the immunity case, he didn't take any paper with him.
Oh, nice.
He didn't have a pad of paper. He didn't have a binder. He didn't have notes. He walked up there empty-handed. And when somebody pointed that out later on, I was just like, that's I'm like, that dude's got balls, man. And
Yeah, I was
somebody else,
gonna say.
and like all the
It's like
commentators
commando, man.
who knew him were just like, no, he's that good, man. It's every bit of it's in his head, and he has total command over it.
I love it. I love it. The brief was amazing. I don't even know how they're going to respond to it. I think Jack did a good job putting this team together.
Yeah, yeah, he did. Um, and we don't really know anything about the timing on that one yet, though, do we? As far as like when there's eventually going to be oral arguments.
We don't have the timing set down. We're still waiting for Trump's brief. And then we have one more brief, of course, from Jack. And then after that, we'll figure out the timing on it. But Trump's brief we should see in a couple weeks.
Yeah, when his comes out, I'll probably read both of them at that point. So lastly,
Uh-oh, I'm scared. I'm scared with that laugh.
I don't know, to great fanfare, and Merrick Garland even had a press conference this week, unveiling this indictment or series of indictments relative to Russian disinformation and misinformation in the United States and trying to interfere with the 2024 election. And within the indictment, I found it interesting. It's like he didn't name this company by name, but he quoted stuff from their website that allowed everybody to figure out exactly who he was talking about.
Oh, I thought it was a big mystery who it was.
Or he quoted stuff directly from their website, and everybody was like, "Here it is, it's these guys."
Right.
And that company is Tenet Management, Tenet. They're out of Tennessee, and they're like a management production company, and they put on podcasts from Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, and all of the money that these guys were getting paid to do their podcasts was coming from Russians.
Yep. My favorite has been, I think one of them has come on and said, yeah, it was me. It was us. I mean, I'm not happy about it, but yeah.
Wow. It's just, I saw a TikTok that Mr. Global made I think it was on Tuesday. He made a great point. He was like, it's not like the Russians were feeding these guys these talking points. They were already basically doing Russian propaganda on their own, and Russia just wanted to amplify it.
Well, my understanding was it was kind of a like undercover job. Like they came in and joined the company and was like, well, what about this? What about this propaganda? What about this propaganda? And nobody double checked them on it.
It's just, I mean, if somebody's paying Tim Pool, who's afraid to leave his house without his hat, three or $4 million a year.
Right.
It's like, does even Tim Pool have an ego big enough to think, no, they're paying me that because I'm worth it?
I really do think they think that. They think that they are so great that that money is just what is owed them.
Absolutely stunning. And so it's like, what I'm waiting to see kind of play out is the mechanics, of this. It's like, are those guys getting paid anymore? Does that company exist anymore? What from that company has the DOJ seized? Have they seized bank accounts and money? You know, it's like, are these guys' paychecks gone now? And see how long they keep doing what they're doing when they're not getting paid for it.
I think I read or saw something where the implication was that the company was no longer going to be owned by the same people. But there's no confirmation about that. That's the only thing I've heard about the future of these people. But in my opinion, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I
There's
think you're right.
so much out there that we do not know of, we the public. I think this is just the beginning.
Yeah. Um, it's just, I mean, and again, it's like I don't know how old you are. I'm not going to ask. I'm 56, and so it's like I was in middle school and high school in the 80s when Ronald Reagan was president. I graduated high school in 1986. You know, he left office in 88. And then we had George H.W. Bush. And then, you know, we had the fall of the Berlin Wall and all of that stuff in the very early 90s. It's like I remember growing up and Russia was the bad guys.
Yeah.
I remember growing up and Russia was the bad guys and the Republican Party was the party of law and order and Democrats were soft on crime. And
Yeah.
now today's GOP under Donald Trump, everybody loves Putin and Russia. And these guys, Tim Pool is saying we should apologize to Russia for Ukraine. And the Republican Party has nominated a felon and wants to defund the FBI.
Yeah.
Such an insane turnaround.
I wonder if it's because our drugs are stronger.
Ah, boy, I don't know, man.
It's crazy. I agree. It's crazy. I would not have imagined that Trump would have gotten this much of a hold on the people with the power. I thought they would have moved on, but they've not moved on.
Oh, I mean, my theory is, you know, up until the day that Joe Biden withdrew from the presidential race, I always said that for the last 10 years, the Republican Party, elected Republicans, have been scared to death of their base because they're crazy and violent. And the Democratic Party, elected Democrats, have always just completely ignored their base. It's like, where else are you guys going to go? You know, no, we're not going to pass a $15 federal minimum wage, and we're not going to do this, and we're not going to do single payer health care. Screw you guys. You're still going to vote for us anyway. And like Joe Biden pulling out of the race, I think, is the first time in my recent memory when the Democratic Party was like listening to its base.
Well, that's controversial.
You've seen my TikToks, right?
I most certainly have, and I think they're fabulous. I think it's
Thank you.
interesting because I think this is the first time where a lot of very devout Democrats have gotten really pissed off with the party. Now, which way they went on the Biden issue didn't matter, but the fact that people were saying, I'm pissed off and we're not going to just walk down the road here. We need something to change. I think you're right. I think this is that big moment.
Yeah. And the polling right now, right after Labor Day, is almost identical to where the polling was in 2020.
Now, I'm not a big polling person. I'm
Yeah.
willing to be convinced. I'm open minded, but
It's
come
like
on.
every election cycle, nobody knows if the polling has been fixed yet, repaired from last time. So I
Like
don't
last
know.
time being like Abraham Lincoln or what?
It's like we started with 2016 and then we had 2020. You know, I mean, and we could do a whole other episode on the Electoral College.
Oh, yes, we could.
And maybe we'll do that sometime. But it's just like,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's like, oh, okay, Joe Biden won by 7 million votes, but it was actually decided by 44,000 votes over 3 states. Okay, I guess that's fine.
Yikes. I don't know. I feel like we're putting so much pressure on Pennsylvania right now that they're going to crack. Pennsylvania is going to be like, look, we want out. It's too much pressure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I've got an aunt and uncle who live outside of Philadelphia, and I've got to give them a call this week and get an on the ground report.
Right?
I mean, they're good Democrats. They're both retired teachers, so they were in union forever, and they're still really politically active. And they're two of my absolute favorite relatives. All right, so let's wrap this up. Thank you again, Attorney Dye, so much for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for dealing with my darkness. It's
No
my
worries.
vampirism.
I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you guys who are listening to this and watching this enjoy it as well. Thanks again for everybody who subscribes, and have a fun and safe weekend. We'll see you guys soon.